Muvango Ramachila walked through his company halls like a man carved from stone. Everyone moved out of his way the moment they heard his footsteps. No one dared to look into his eyes for more than a second. People said he could fire someone with just one cold stare, and no one doubted it. He built Ramatech from nothing and ruled it with strict rules that scared even his managers. He never smiled, never joked, never showed even a small sign of kindness. To him, feelings were something weak people used as excuses. He believed silence kept order, and his staff learned quickly that speaking without reason could cost them their job. Even at home, he carried that same hard energy. His penthouse was always spotless, quiet, and lifeless, and that was exactly how he liked it. When the maid came in to clean, he hardly nodded, barely greeting her, acting as if she was invisible. He never bothered to learn anything about her. He never asked her name or wondered why she worked so many hours. He paid her, she cleaned, and that was the end of it in his mind. He kept people at a distance because getting close felt dangerous to him. He had built walls around his world so strong that no emotion could enter. But life has a strange way of breaking the strongest walls. Something small, something unexpected, something he never imagined would matter began to shake the cold routine he trusted. It started on a night when he came home earlier than usual, tired from meetings that ran longer than planned. The penthouse lights were dim, and the soft sound of movement reached him. Normally, he ignored whatever happened in the background, but this time something stopped him. A voice, quiet, trembling, reached him before he stepped forward. He froze. He had never heard a voice like that inside his home. It wasn't fear, anger, or disrespect. It was worry, deep, painful worry. He felt an unfamiliar pull in his chest, something he had not felt in years. For the first time in a long time, he paused and listened instead of walking past. And in that moment, without knowing it, the life he had lived without emotion began to change, little by little, because of a whisper not meant for him at all. Nalazwim Pico moved quietly through the penthouse each day, almost like a shadow. She never made noise, never complained, never spoke unless someone asked her a direct question. People often walked past her without noticing she was there, and she preferred it that way. She kept her eyes down, her hands busy, and her thoughts to herself. Life had trained her to avoid attention because attention usually brought problems she couldn't afford. She worked carefully, wiping every surface and cleaning every corner, knowing that one mistake could cost her the only job keeping her family alive. Every morning, before the sun rose, she prepared her son Ayanda for another long day inside the quiet apartment. The boy was only 8, too young to understand why his mother had to take him along. But she had no one back home who could watch over him, and leaving him alone in their small room was too dangerous. So she carried him with her, whispering soft promises that one day things would get better. His small frame leaned against her as they traveled, often coughing in a way that made her heart twist with fear. She tried her best to hide the worry in her eyes, but any mother would break hearing their child struggle to breathe. Inside the penthouse, she set him in a corner with a blanket and a few old crayons. He tried to smile at her, but she could see he was tired. His body felt warm every time she touched his forehead, and each cough seemed worse than the last one. She wished she could hold him all day, but she had work to do, and if she stopped for too long, she might lose her only source of income. So she cleaned while glancing at him every few minutes, praying he would not get worse. She used leftover moments to give him sips of water, or press a cloth against his sweaty face. She never let anyone see her fear, because she knew no one in that penthouse cared about a maid's child. The world had taught her to stay invisible, to survive quietly. But even in her silence, her love for Ayanda was loud. Each day she pushed through exhaustion for him, hoping her small efforts would be enough to keep him going until she could find real help she knew she couldn't afford yet. One evening, Muvango returned to his penthouse earlier than usual, hoping for a quiet moment after a long day. He pushed the door open, expecting the same silence that always greeted him. But tonight, something different filled the air, a soft, shaky whisper that made him stop before taking another step. He frowned, wondering if he had misheard. But the voice came again, low and full of fear. It was Nalazwi speaking, but her tone was nothing like the quiet worker he barely noticed. Her words were gentle, almost breaking, as if she was trying to hold herself together. He moved closer without meaning to, drawn by the sound he couldn't ignore. From the hallway, He could hear the boy coughing so hard it echoed off the walls. The sound wasn't like a normal cough. This one was deep, painful, and frightening. Each harsh breath hit Muvhango like a strange jolt. He had heard anger, stress, and even desperation in his company, but he had never heard anything like this inside his home. It wasn't noise. It was suffering. Nalazwi's voice trembled as she begged her child to stay strong. He could hear her panic, her helplessness, and her love all wrapped together in those few words. She wasn't trying to bother anyone. She wasn't asking for help. She was simply trying to comfort her child in the only way she could, believing no one else cared or could do anything. Muvhango stood completely still, surprised to feel something he didn't understand tightening in his chest. He wasn't used to moments like this. He wasn't used to emotions at all. He could see a faint light coming from the room where she kept her son during work. His feet, almost on their own, moved a little closer as he tried to understand what he was hearing. He had always lived with distance around him, but this sound broke right through it. The raw pain in the boy's coughing and the trembling in Nalazwi's voice made him feel something he'd tried to bury for years. For the first time in a long time, the cold CEO didn't think about rules, silence, or control. He simply listened, frozen in place, as a mother fought to comfort a child who was hurting more than he had ever realized. Something inside him shifted, quietly but deeply, as that moment pressed into him in a way he couldn't ignore. Muvhango stood quietly behind the corridor wall, unsure why he couldn't walk away. Something pulled him to look, even though he knew he shouldn't be watching. When he leaned slightly forward, the scene in front of him felt unreal. Nalazwi sat on the floor with her son, her hands shaking as she fed him small bites of food she had taken from his own fridge, food she clearly hoped no one would miss. She didn't eat anything herself. Every piece went straight to the boy, as if she had decided long ago that he came before her in everything. Ayanda's face was red and sweaty, his small body trembling from a fever that looked dangerously high. His breathing was uneven, and each time he tried to swallow, he coughed so hard it made his whole body curl forward. Nalazwi quickly caught him, holding him close, whispering soft prayers under her breath. Her voice cracked, her words breaking apart as she begged for strength, for healing, for just one moment where her child could breathe without pain. She pressed the back of her hand against his forehead, and the worry in her eyes showed she already knew something was very wrong. Muvhango had never seen her like this. At work, she was quiet and focused, moving through the penthouse with steady steps. Now she looked exhausted, scared, and completely alone. Her apron became a towel as she wiped the sweat from Ayanda's face, trying to calm him even though she was trembling herself. She held him as if she feared he might slip away if she let go for even a second. He felt his stomach twist as he realized the truth. She had been cleaning his home every day while carrying this heavy burden. She had been hiding her fear, her son's sickness, and her struggles because she believed she had no choice. She needed the job. She needed the money. And she needed to survive. Watching her kneel beside the child, whispering desperate prayers, made something inside him shift. He had thought of her as just another worker. He had never once wondered what happened in her life outside his clean floors and organized shelves. But seeing her now, tired, hungry, scared for her son, opened a door in his heart he thought he had permanently locked. In that quiet corner of the penthouse he finally understood. She wasn't just working. She was fighting for her child's life every single day, silently and alone. Muvhango felt something push him forward, something stronger than his usual cold rules. Before he could stop himself, he stepped out from behind the wall and walked straight into the room. The sound of his footsteps made Nalazwi jump. She quickly stood, her hands shaking, her eyes wide with fear. She looked like someone who had been caught doing something unforgivable, even though all she had done was care for her child. She opened her mouth to explain, to apologize, to beg, but the words froze on her tongue. She was sure this was the moment she would lose her job. But instead of yelling or giving orders, Muvhango did something no one would ever believe. He lowered himself to the floor, right beside Ayanda. His expensive suit touched the carpet without a second thought. He leaned closer to the boy, watching the rising fever in his face, listening to the rough breathing that made the child's small shoulders shake. The sight hit him so hard that he couldn't look away. He gently asked a question, his voice soft in a way Nalazwi had never heard before. How long has he been like this? There was no anger, just concern, real concern, from a man who never showed any feelings at all. Nalazwi swallowed hard, her eyes filling with tears. She tried to speak, but her voice broke the first time. Finally, she whispered the truth she had been hiding for so long. Months, sir, but hospitals are too expensive. The words fell into the room like heavy stones. She looked down, ashamed. Even though she had done everything she could, she feared he would judge her for bringing her child to work, for letting him get so sick, for not being able to afford proper care. Her answer stunned him. Months. The boy had been suffering for months while she kept working, cleaning his home, staying silent because she needed the job more than anything. The weight of her struggle hit him in a way he never expected. He saw not a maid, but a desperate mother doing whatever she could to save her child. For the first time in many years, something cracked inside him. The coldness he held onto so tightly started to melt. He realized she hadn't been trying to break rules. She had been trying to keep her son alive with the little she had. And in that moment, the strict CEO felt a deep, painful guilt for never noticing sooner. As Muvhango looked at Ayanda struggling to breathe, something inside him shifted like a door he had locked years ago suddenly swinging open. The boy's weak body, the heat on his skin, the helpless sounds he made. It all pulled him back to a part of his life he tried to bury. A memory rose so clearly that it almost felt like he was living it again. He saw himself as a young child, lying alone in a cold bedroom, burning with fever, calling out for help that never came. His father had been in the next room, too busy talking about money and meetings to notice his son was sick. He remembered the loneliness more than the pain. He remembered staring at the ceiling and wishing someone would hold him, even for a moment. That same emptiness now reflected in Ayanda's eyes, and it struck him deeper than he expected. He had built his whole life trying to be strong, trying to prove he didn't need anyone, forcing himself to shut out every feeling that reminded him of that childhood pain. But seeing this small boy suffering while the mother tried desperately to comfort him, made the old wound reopen. It hurt in a way he couldn't hide. For the first time in years, guilt pushed through the hard shell he wore like armor. He realized he had become too much like the man he once hated, the father who never cared, who never paused long enough to see his own child's fear. He had ignored people around him, treated emotions like something to avoid, and believed power meant being untouchable. But looking at Nalazwi kneeling beside her son, praying quietly, doing everything she could with nothing, it made him question everything he stood for. He felt ashamed for not noticing her struggle earlier, ashamed for thinking she was just another worker, ashamed for never imagining that someone could be fighting such a painful battle right under his roof. The strong, cold image he had built cracked, not loudly but deeply. He understood that the wall he had built around his heart had not protected him. It had blinded him. For the first time, he didn't think about rules or reputation. He thought about a sick boy who reminded him of himself, and a mother who refused to give up. And in that moment, the man who never cared finally felt the weight of what he had ignored for too long. Without wasting another second, Muvhango reached forward and gently lifted Ayanda into his arms. The child felt far too light, his skin burning with fever, his breathing shallow and uneven. Nalazwi gasped, shocked that the strict man who never touched anyone was now holding her son as if he were something precious. She tried to speak, but her voice failed. Before she could gather her thoughts, he looked at her with a seriousness she had never seen, and told her to follow him. There was no hesitation in his tone, only urgency. He walked quickly through the hallway, holding the boy close to his chest. Nalazwi hurried behind, clutching her hands together, terrified but hopeful at the same time. Outside, he opened the car door and carefully placed Ayanda in the back seat. Then he told Nalazwi to get in, his voice firm but softer than she expected. She obeyed instantly, still unsure if this was real. Moments later, they sped through the quiet streets of Duramo City, lights flashing past as Muvhango drove faster than he ever had before. His usual calm was gone. All he cared about was reaching help in time. When they arrived at the private hospital, doctors rushed forward the moment they saw the child. Muvhango didn't wait in line or fill out forms. He simply ordered them to take the boy immediately, and something in his tone made everyone move faster. Nalazwi held her breath as they placed Ayanda on a stretcher and pushed him through the emergency doors. She wanted to run after him, but the nurses stopped her gently, promising they would take care of him. Minutes felt like hours as they waited outside the room. Nalazwi clasped her hands tightly, whispering prayers under her breath. Mvengo stood beside her, silent but alert, watching every doctor who passed by, as if waiting for someone to give him an answer. Finally, a senior doctor came out, his face serious. He explained that Ayanda had a dangerous lung infection that had been growing for a long time. The boy needed immediate treatment, strong medicine, tests, and care only a well-equipped hospital could provide. Hearing this made Nalazwi's knees weaken. She feared the worst again, but before she could say anything, Mvengo stepped forward and told the doctor to do whatever was needed. Cost didn't matter. Time didn't matter. Saving the child was all that mattered. At that moment, Nalazwi realized her life had changed completely, all because someone she thought had no heart finally decided to act. When the doctors explained the full cost of the treatment, Nalazwi felt her heart sink. It was more money than she could ever dream of earning, even if she worked for years without rest. She opened her mouth to confess that she couldn't afford any of it, but before she could speak, Mvengo stepped forward and told the staff to begin every test immediately. He didn't ask the price. He didn't hesitate. He simply instructed them to do whatever was necessary to save the boy. His firm voice made the nurses move quickly, as if they knew they were dealing with someone who would not accept delay. As the team prepared medication and arranged equipment, the manager brought a long list of charges for approval. Without even looking twice, Mvengo signed the papers and handed them back. Surgery, scans, treatment plans, he covered it all without blinking. Everyone around was surprised, unable to believe that the cold businessman who was known for strict rules and sharp decisions was now acting with such compassion. But he didn't care about what anyone thought. His eyes stayed focused on the room where Ayanda was being treated, as if the world outside no longer mattered. Nalazwi's emotions finally broke. She pressed her hands to her face as tears poured uncontrollably. She tried to thank him, but her voice came out in broken pieces. All her life she had fought alone, suffering quietly, holding her struggles inside because no one ever helped her. Now seeing someone step in so powerfully, someone she once feared, was more than her heart could handle. She cried from relief, fear, gratitude, and exhaustion all at once. Mvengo gently turned toward her, his expression soft in a way she had never seen. He didn't give a long speech. He didn't try to comfort her with fancy words. He simply said in a low and steady voice, "Let him live. That's all that matters." Those few words carried more meaning than anything he had ever said before. It was a promise, a vow, a decision that he would not allow this child to suffer anymore. Hearing him speak like that made Nalazwi's tears fall even harder. She realized she was no longer fighting this battle alone. Someone powerful had stepped in. Someone who understood pain more deeply than he ever showed. And in that moment, she felt hope return to her life, hope she thought she had lost forever. Ayanda slowly began to get better. His fever dropped, his cough eased, and he started to smile again, small at first, then brighter with each passing day. Nalazwi couldn't stop watching him, her heart light with relief. She had never imagined she would see him healthy again, laughing and playing as if nothing had ever hurt him. Every moment of recovery felt like a miracle, and she quietly thanked Mvengo for stepping in when no one else could. Seeing the boy alive and strong filled her with a mix of joy and disbelief. At the same time, something remarkable was happening at Ramatek. Mvengo returned to his office with a new purpose. The cold, strict CEO that everyone feared was no longer the same man. He began to make changes in the company that shocked everyone. First, he announced free health insurance for all staff, from executives to janitors. Employees who had always worried about medical costs now felt a wave of relief and gratitude. Next, he introduced a childcare program so that parents could work without fearing for their children. It was designed with love and understanding, as if he remembered the struggles Nalazwi had faced every day. Finally, he increased salaries for domestic workers, showing that their hard work mattered, and that he valued their lives beyond the floors they cleaned. Word of the CEO's transformation spread quickly. Staff whispered in awe, unable to believe what they were seeing. People who had once avoided eye contact with him now smiled nervously, watching him walk through the office with a calmer, kinder presence. Managers who had feared his wrath now felt a sense of curiosity and respect. Everyone wondered how a man who had never shown warmth or care could suddenly change so completely. It was as if something inside him had finally awakened. A realization that power and success meant nothing without compassion, that life was fragile, and everyone deserved care. Muvhango didn't make announcements about himself. He didn't brag about the new policies or expect praise. Instead, he quietly ensured that every employee had support, protection, and encouragement. The company culture began to shift, filled with hope and gratitude, and even Nalazwi noticed how small acts of care could ripple into a larger world. Staff members whispered to each other about the mysterious change in the CEO, trying to guess what had caused it. But Muvhango knew the reason clearly. One sick boy, one desperate mother, and one quiet moment of witnessing true struggle had broken through the walls he had built around his heart. That single experience transformed him, and through his actions, it transformed everyone around him as well. One afternoon, as Muvhango visited Ayanda in his small, bright room, the boy ran toward him, holding something clutched in his tiny hands. It was a hand-drawn picture, colored with crayons that were smudged from hours of effort. The image showed Ayanda smiling, holding the hand of a tall man who looked like Muvhango. Below the drawing, in the uneven scrawl of a child, were the words, "You saved me. You're my superhero." The boy looked up at him with wide, innocent eyes full of trust and gratitude. Muvhango felt a strange warmth spread through his chest. For years, he had built a shield around himself, hiding every feeling, refusing to show weakness. But looking at this picture, hearing the words from the child he had helped, all that coldness shattered. He felt tears sting his eyes, and before he knew it, they rolled down his cheeks. He had never cried openly, never allowed anyone to see him break. But in that moment, he could not stop it. The realization of what he had done, of the life he had saved, overwhelmed him. Afterwards, he quietly made plans to secure Ayanda's future. He set up a private education fund in the boy's name, ensuring that the child would have every opportunity to learn, grow, and live a life without the fear and struggle he had endured. No one outside knew about this decision. It was personal, a silent promise he intended to keep. Muvhango also looked at Nalazwi, standing beside her son, and recognized her courage, her devotion, and the endless sacrifices she had made. He decided to honor her work in a meaningful way. He created a new department within Ramatech, called Employee Welfare, and promoted Nalazwi as the first coordinator. Her role would help other employees facing difficulties, providing support, care, and understanding. What had begun as one mother's quiet struggle had now inspired a company-wide change, affecting many lives. The transformation was complete. Muvhango had gone from a man feared for his coldness to a leader known for compassion. He understood that sometimes the smallest voices, the quietest whispers, could awaken the greatest change. One mother's love, one child's struggle, one simple whisper had broken through his hardened heart and changed everything. From that day forward, he carried not only responsibility but also empathy, proving that even the hardest hearts can learn to care deeply when they witness true human need. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to like, comment your thoughts, and subscribe to our channel for more incredible African tales every day. Don't miss the next story.